for supply of vaccines. And we did not assess the actual capacity of the two domestic manufacturers to produce and supply the vaccines. Each one of the mistakes was the consequence of centralization. The second challenge is in the design and execution of the vaccination program. In a democracy, people cannot be forced to take the vaccination. The governments must work together to inform the people, educate the people, and communicate to the people in a language and a manner that motivates the people to become willing participants in the vaccination program. Politics has no place in such an effort. Non-democracies do not allow any politics and are able to implement the program as an apolitical program. On the other hand, democracy is political contestation. The Treasury benches will be contested by the opposition benches. That is democracy. As we learn to our misfortune, political partisanship could creep into allocation of funds, oxygen, ventilators, and vaccines, causing a grave setback to the fight against the pandemic. Keeping politics out in a political democracy requires statesmanship of a high order. The third challenge is resources. And we all know that in a developing country, we are always short of resources. And no government is to blame for that. Long-established democracies have, over the years, got their priorities right. After security, the first claimants to resources are education and health care. For example, any government in the United Kingdom that undermined the National Health Service, the famous NHS, will face certain defeat at the next election. Nascent democracies have ignored these priorities with impunity. No political party has been punished yet in India for the awful state of schools and hospitals. No political party has been punished for a lack of adequate number of doctors or nurses or hospital beds or oxygen capacity or medicines. When a pandemic strikes, such democracies are exposed. Democracies are slow to realize it is their negligence of the past that is the cause of the chaotic conditions of the present. The fourth challenge, and in my view, the most important challenge, is the widening of disparities among the people. A democracy implies both political democracy and economic democracy. Elimination of poverty and reducing inequalities are globally accepted goals among democratic countries. A pandemic has the exact opposite effect. And we have witnessed this in the last 2 years. In the last decade, as Joshi-ji mentioned, 27 crore people were lifted above the poverty line. Reversing that achievement, the last 2 years may, according to a study conducted by a university, pushed 23 crore people into poverty. I shall not dwell at length on the economic challenges posed by the pandemic. That would require a separate lecture. Let's look at only the non-economic consequences. Let me repeat. Let's look at only the non-economic consequences and their impact on democracy. I take one example, the deprivation of school education. All India school education surveys have shown that learning outcomes have always fallen short of the goals. A fifth-class student can barely read a second-class textbook. Consider the terrible setback in the scholastic lives of the poor children who have been locked out of their schools because of the pandemic and who have been excluded from online learning because they cannot access smart devices. Where will these children go? They cannot go to school. They cannot access online learning. These poor children of India will fall further behind their peers. India's democratic governments, both at the center and in the states, have found no answer to this catastrophe.
साथियों,
The
हमें
governments,
टेस्टिंग
let me say with
और
regret,
ट्रीटमेंट से जुड़े
stand
इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर
as
में
helpless spectators.
सुधार करते हुए आगे
In my
चल
view,
रहा है।
This has been
इसके
the
लिए
most devastating impact of the pandemic. We can only bow our heads in sorrow and guilt. The fifth challenge is to make the legislative branch, your branch, my branch, to work to mitigate the suffering of the people. The
हमारे
executive
भारतीय
branch,
जनता पार्टी के बहुत ही
those of
कर्मशील,
us who have
संवेदनशील,
been ministers,
जुझारू
those of us
प्रदेश
who will be
अध्यक्ष
ministers,
श्री स्वतंत्र देव
know
सिंह जी,
that the executive
हमारे
branch
उत्तर प्रदेश
has
के
a tendency
यशस्वी
to
मुख्यमंत्री
assume all power to itself
हम सबके
and
आदरणीय
regards the legislative
योगी
branch
आदित्यनाथ
as
जी,
an intermeddler.
हमारे
In a democratic system
उत्तर प्रदेश के
where there's
प्रभारी
a clear separation of
और पूर्व
powers,
में भारत सरकार में
as in the
मंत्री रहे,
United States,
ऐसे
the
हमारे राधा मोहन सिंह
legislators
जी,
can and do
हमारे
assert themselves.
उप मुख्यमंत्री केशव
In
प्रसाद
old
मौर्य जी,
established democracies
दिनेश
like the
शर्मा जी,
United Kingdom,
सुनील बंसल
it would
जी
be unthinkable,
और यहाँ दिल्ली में
completely
मेरे साथ उपस्थित
unthinkable, not to call the parliament to meet and hold its
श्रीमती
sessions
स्मृति ईरानी
on an
जी,
almost daily basis.
भाई महेंद्र नाथ पांडे जी,
Textbook-bound
से
democracies
सांसद और
find excuses
राष्ट्रीय
not to
महामंत्री
call a
श्री अरुण
session
सिंह
of
जी,
parliament or to
यहाँ
curtail the
उपस्थित
sessions of
हमारे भारत
parliament.
सरकार में
They
केंद्रीय
will find
मंत्री,
excuses in the
सांसदगण,
rules not to
विधायकगण,
hold meetings of parliamentary
हमारे
committees.
वरिष्ठ पदाधिकारी और
They will
कार्यकर्ता
also
बंधु
find arguments
और हमारे
not to
कार्य समिति
employ
के सभी
technology
सदस्यगण।
to
मेरा ये
facilitate such
सौभाग्य है
committee
कि मुझे
meetings.
आज
That is the
उत्तर
price
प्रदेश के
that the
कार्य
people
समिति में
and the
आप
elected
सबके साथ
legislators
शामिल
pay
होने का सौभाग्य मिला
for allowing the rulers
और आप
to
सबसे
observe the
चर्चा
letter
करने का भी मुझे
but
सौभाग्य
bury the
मिला है।
spirit of a
इसके लिए मैं
constitutional
प्रदेश
democracy.
कार्य
As
समिति और प्रदेश
legislators,
अध्यक्ष को
we
धन्यवाद
must be
देता
on
हूँ।
our guard.
हम जब उत्तर
The
प्रदेश की
sixth
बात करते
challenge
हैं
is a
तो उत्तर
subversion
प्रदेश
of
की
the rule
बात
of law during a natural
बिना बाबा
disaster like
विश्वनाथ
the
जी को
pandemic.
याद किए हुए
Non-democracies
भगवान राम
follow
की
rule
जन्मभूमि को
by
याद किए हुए
law.
और श्री कृष्ण
The law
भूमि श्री
is
कृष्ण जी
what
की
the
भूमि
ruler
को
says
बिना
it
याद
is,
किए और
or
नमन
what
किए
the
हम आगे
ruler
बढ़ नहीं
makes
सकते।
for each
मैं
situation.
अपनी ओर से इस
In a
पवित्र
democracy,
धरती को नमन
The
करता हूँ
governing principle is
यह
rule
धरती
of law.
जिसने वैदिक काल से ही
Unlike rule by
संतों
law,
का आशीर्वाद प्राप्त
the
किया,
rule of
फिर चाहे
law
वो भारद्वाज ऋषि थे,
requires
गौतम ऋषि थे,
multiple institutional
वशिष्ठ
support.
ऋषि थे,